and blessings to the ancestors who built schools when it was illegal to read, to the elders who carried knowledge across oceans, through chains, and into the mouths of children who were never supposed to learn their own names. And peace to the builders watching right now. The homeschool parents rewriting the curriculum at their kitchen tables. The teachers inside the system who smuggle real history into lesson plans. The digital creators building Pan-African classrooms that have no walls and no borders. This one is for all of you. There is a narrative that gets repeated every time someone talks about building Black institutions. The narrative says we are starting from scratch, that everything must be invented, that the resources do not exist yet. That narrative is wrong. The fragments of a sovereign Black educational ecosystem already exist across the diaspora. Historically, Black colleges and universities that have produced generations of leaders under severe resource constraint. Independent Afrocentric schools that have maintained cultural grounding for decades. Homeschool cooperatives where families exercise direct control over what their children learn. Digital platforms where Pan-African creators are building curriculum that has no walls and no borders. The challenge is not creation from nothing. The challenge is coordination. Let us be specific about what already exists. Historically, Black colleges and universities have operated for over a century. They have produced 80% of Black judges in the United States, 50% of Black doctors, 50% of Black engineers. They did this with a fraction of the funding that predominantly white institutions receive. Independent Afrocentric schools have operated in cities across the country since the 1960s. Schools like Nation House in Washington, D.C. and CIBI, affiliated institutions built entire K through 12 pipelines rooted in African-centered pedagogy. They proved that when Black children are educated within their own cultural framework, academic performance does not decline. It increases. These are not experiments. These are established institutions with decades of measurable results. Beyond formal institutions, two other movements have been building quietly and powerfully. Black homeschool cooperatives have grown significantly over the past decade. Families are choosing to exit a system that was never designed with their children in mind and are building their own. They share curricula, rotate teaching responsibilities, and create micro-communities of learning that center African identity, financial literacy, and critical thinking. These are not parents who gave up on education. These are parents who decided to take direct ownership of it. At the same time, digital platforms have removed every geographic barrier that once limited sovereign education to a single city or neighborhood. Online academies and content creators are teaching Pan-African history, African languages, and decolonized science to students across the diaspora. A child in London can now learn from a teacher in Accra. A teenager in Atlanta can study the same curriculum as a student in Nairobi. The classroom no longer requires a building. So, if all of these fragments already exist, why does the system still feel broken? Why do Black families still feel like they are navigating education alone? Because each of these institutions operates in isolation. There is no shared curriculum connecting the HBCU to the homeschool cooperative to the digital academy. There is no coordinated funding pipeline. There is no clear pathway from one level to the next. A child educated in an Afrocentric elementary school has no guaranteed Afrocentric middle school to attend afterward. A homeschool family has no direct bridge into an HBCU admissions pipeline. What sovereignty requires is not more fragments. It requires architecture, a deliberate, coordinated ecosystem where each institution feeds into the next, where funding flows to all levels, and where a family can see a clear path from early childhood through adult professional development without ever having to surrender their cultural framework. If we are building the architecture, we must also define what gets taught inside it. A sovereign curriculum is not a modified version of the existing one with more Black history added. It is a fundamentally different framework built around 4 pillars. First, financial literacy, not as an elective, as a core subject from elementary school forward. Ownership, investment, cooperative economics, and generational wealth transfer must be taught as foundational knowledge. Second, Pan-African history. Full diaspora history from ancient Africa through today. Not as a supplement to someone else's story, as the foundation of the entire curriculum. Third, technology ownership. Not just how to use technology, how to build it, own it, and profit from it. Every generation that comes after us will live in a world shaped by whoever controls the platforms. Our children must be builders, not just users. Fourth, civic sovereignty. Understanding power, governance, and how to build autonomous community structures. Not civics class that teaches you how someone else's system works. Civic education that teaches you how to build your own. This is what the architecture looks like when we build it with intention. A shared curriculum framework that every institution in the ecosystem can adopt and adapt. Not one school's approach imposed on all the others. A common set of standards that ensure a child educated at any point in the ecosystem receives the 4 pillars: financial literacy, Pan-African history, technology ownership, and civic sovereignty. A coordinated funding model that does not rely on government approval or corporate sponsorship to sustain itself. Cooperative funding, community bonds, endowment building at every level. When you control the money, you control the mission. And a clear pipeline from early childhood through adult professional development. So a family never has to leave the ecosystem. So a child who begins in an Afrocentric preschool has a path through elementary, secondary, university, and lifelong learning without ever being forced to trade their cultural identity for a credential. We are not starting from nothing. We have never been starting from nothing. The historically Black colleges and universities, the independent schools, the homeschool networks, the digital academies, the fragments are already here. What has been missing is the architecture to connect them. The deliberate design that turns isolated effort into a coordinated ecosystem. That is what educational sovereignty actually requires. Not better participation in someone else's system. A system of our own. The full blueprint is in Educational Sovereignty, Volume 4 of the Sovereignty series, available now at blackmetrics.space. If this spoke to something you have been thinking about, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe so you do not miss what comes next. From data to destiny, peace and blessings.